Hello, my name is Natalie Zalata. Thank you for joining me in this presentation about the many historical influencers of Georgia. My presentation is about how even though our second grade curriculum is becoming more and more inclusive, there are people whose voices are silent when it comes to their influence in our state. Please join me as we learn more about our heritage. I first want to make sure that my students are able to share what they already know. This allows my students to connect what they are about to learn to what they already know so they can increase their own knowledge. First, my students will talk to their neighbors about any Georgia hero that they know who influenced Georgia's history and how they influenced the state. There are several people that they can choose from who we have already learned about in our class. These are a few of the amazing people who have influenced our state. These are hard-working people who have fought hard to make Georgia what it is today. They are important and should be learned about. People like James Oglethorpe, who helped found our colony. Tomochichi, the chief of the Creek natives, who helped Oglethorpe create the colony. Mary Musgrove, who translated for the two of them, ensuring peaceful communication. Martin Luther King Jr., who was extremely influential in the beginning of the end of segregation in the U.S. Jackie Robinson, who played baseball in order to bring equality to the sports world. Juliette Gordon Low, who founded the Girl Scouts in order to teach girls about leadership. These amazing, influential people are super important to the creation of Georgia, but they are not the only ones that we need to be learning about. Although our standards include many amazing people of various backgrounds, we very much lack those of Hispanic, Asian, and Muslim, or even other religious backgrounds. Our county, Gwinnett, is one of the most diverse counties in the nation, according to niche.com. It doesn't include all of its residents in our curriculum, however. My own classroom has a high majority Hispanic population, but I don't get to teach my students about Latino or Latina influence in Georgia. After some research, I was able to find some amazing people working hard to make sure that Georgia remains an inclusive state, such as Adelina Nichols, who is the Executive Director of Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights. Dax E. Lopez, who is the State Court Judge of DeKalb County. Masai Y. Okura, who is the representative of multinational companies that want to know more about the U.S. immigration decisions, especially in Georgia. And Soyumaya Khalifa, who is the Executive Director for the Society for Intercultural Education, Training, and Research in Georgia. It is so important for our curriculum to match our diverse population. As you can read from my slide, Georgia is the state that we live in, and it has a rich history. Many of the people who influenced Georgia were Native American, white, African American, female, and male. However, we have taught little about other subgroups that are represented in this state, such as Latino and Latina, Asian, or Muslim, or other religions. Our student populations today are a mixture of all of these subgroups, and it's important to include them as influencers in our state. Now we are going to talk about how teaching equality in the classroom normally goes, and some typical approaches to the subject that teachers generally have. These standards show what we are currently asked to teach in Gwinnett County schools. We are progressing in our inclusion of these groups within our population. We're beginning to teach more about equality and our diversity, and we're starting to show men and women of color in a positive light. However, that we do teach tends to elevate the white side, quote-unquote, of history, and rarely do teachers expound on the cultures of the Native Americans or the African Americans. We also completely exclude Asian, Latino, Latina, and other religious groups like Muslims from our curriculum. Even though we are beginning to be inclusive, we obviously still have a long way to go. Our school also has many online resources, such as BrainPop Jr. and Pebble Go. Although these websites are full of diversity and equity, there are some amazing leaders who are not generally included within our AKS, or who are taught extensively to our students. Some leaders aren't even shown as an option to learn about yet on these sites. There are some influencers who are not from Georgia online as well, and those are easy for teachers to widen the curriculum on their own with these resources, but they need to choose to do so and be aware of the need for expanded diversity. Although many various and inclusive books do exist, they are not as prevalent as the books shown here on this slide within our school's classrooms. While these are amazing and inclusive, there should be more of a variety in schools beyond the aforementioned AKS. Many important figures are not even written about yet and should be more accessible to our students. So what's missing? As you can see in this slide, our county standards are inclusive towards Native American, white, African American, male and female influencers in Georgia, but of the standards are missing other subgroups that have influenced Georgia history and culture, like Hispanic, Asian, Muslim, and more. These groups should be included because many of our students today represent these groups as well. As this quote says, students need to see themselves reflected in the books that they read, the curriculum they study, and the classrooms where they learn. This is likely to regularly occur for students from mainstream European American families. The culturally responsive curriculum focuses on the need to develop teaching strategies and materials that are more consistent with the cultural orientations of ethnically and globally diverse students. Geneva Gay points out that using the cultural knowledge, experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students makes learning much more relevant and effective. We tend to be missing this important aspect in this classroom with our students of Latino, Latina, Asian, and Muslim backgrounds. And although we have some Native American, African American, and women's perspectives, they are usually views that uphold a white or European American and Christian story. We are also lacking in some resources. I looked in many places for some books about Georgian influencers, but I had a very difficult time in finding some. I was able to find books about people who have influenced the world, like the Dalai Lama, Fidel Castro, and Malala Yousafzai. But we need to write more books about Georgian influential leaders as well. So, what is something that we can do better? I found a blog post from a concerned mother that reads, so many history books, especially those for elementary grades, are not only whitewashed, but they're a downright distort of history to make it a nice little fairy tale. I want my children to learn the truth from an early age, but I guess using a public school curriculum, you don't have that sort of freedom. If we're not truthful about the past, and if we're not honest with our history and the history of other cultures, then why are we teaching history? We should teach our children the truth of what happened, honor those perspectives, and be true to what actually occurred. We need to include more perspectives so students can see their own history in what we learn. We are also able to read and even write more inclusive literature. As I stated previously, it was very difficult to find any books pertaining to Georgia heroes that were of diverse backgrounds beyond white, Native American, African American, male, and female. However, these other influencers can also be learned about in the meantime. We need to make sure that, as teachers, we are purposeful in including these other amazing people who have changed the world for the better. Some questions that can help teachers better choose books include the following listed on the screen. For example, who is or who are the main characters? Are there any stereotypes that are assumed that are not challenged as false? Are there any minorities or subgroups represented, and if so, how are they represented? Is the history accurate or factual? Last are my own thoughts and final conclusions about this topic. I encourage teachers to think outside the box when it comes to teaching equity in the classroom. It is so important to be inclusive of the students represented in your classroom. Think about how those American heroes can be included in your own classroom to better connect with your students. As Shiflett and Hennig state, one of America's strengths is the diversity of her people, rich in culture and perspectives. When we choose to listen and consider the perspectives of others, our own thoughts, ideas, and understandings are enhanced. We need to be more inclusive, we need to continue progressing, and we need to continue to honor those cultures that are already so important in our great state.